There is a recent movie, 2014, called Transformation, The Life of Werner Erhard. And it shows a video clip of Werner as a young man doing his EST training. And there's a young lady who reports that I think at least twice her folks had dumped her in an orphanage. And Werner says to her that she's responsible for that. Now, there's a video clip of a guy who started Esalen claiming that that's one of the flaws in Werner's work and ideas, is this idea that you're walking down the street and a piece of glass off a skyscraper falls and chops you in half and you're responsible for that. I don't think that's exactly what Werner's saying, but the way Werner does say it is kind of clumsy, because in English, responsible means you caused it, or you could have caused something else. And I think that the word that's helpful is response able. And if the young lady who was put into an orphanage twice in her young years can get her mind around that from a very young age she has been response able, and that all of us have been, there comes just a sliver of understanding that we have an extraordinary power in our lives. That, you see, the labeling that it was an orphanage was her response. She created that it was an orphanage. She didn't create that her parents put her somewhere because, God knows, let's assume that they couldn't take care of her, that maybe they were motivated by love. But she created the response that it was an orphanage, and she created the response that she was abandoned, and she created the response that she wasn't lovable, and most importantly, she created the response that she is unlovable. And if any human being can get hold of that they are response able, and that all the shit that's happened to you in your life is shit only because that was the response you created to whatever the reality was, it holds out this sliver of hope that you can create all the responses hereafter. So the book of John in the Gospels begins, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And Helen Keller reports that until there was the Word, until Annie Sullivan's scratching in her palm and pumping the water, until those two things came together and formed a word, Helen was simply in darkness and stillness. But it was the Word that created her world. Now that's both good and bad, because for the most part, we create our world. We use word to create the world's a nasty place. And for the most part, the creation of our lives in our words are from received words. Our culture, our gender, our siblings, our playmates, all gave us the words to tell us who we are. Okay, that's the bad news. The good news is that it ought to be possible then that we could use words to create a different life. But how? I'm not sure. I think that an important part is that we find people willing to hear our new speaking of who we are and who show ruthless compassion to demand that we live inside our new words of who we are. Other than that, I'm not really sure how we go about the god-awful hard work of creating a life instead of living in reaction to the words we received about ourselves. Good morning.